Hey everybody, this is Sinix, and I have a very special guest with me today. It is MrJack, aka Luke Mancini.
Hello, everybody.
And maybe just for starters, before we get into some digital painting, because he did a wonderful digital painting for us, but I thought we would talk a little bit about who that is in case you don't know. So, Mr. Jack, who are you and what do you do?
I am a concept artist currently working at Blizzard Entertainment on the StarCraft team. I've been working out here for the last 2 years or so. Moved out from Australia. Um, but yeah, so
That sounds like a pretty dreamy job for probably most of the people watching.
yes, and it's
I'm sure
even
you get
more
a lot of
awesome than you imagine.
envious, amazing, awestruck people because you work at Blizzard.
Yes, I guess there is a bit of that. I still can't quite believe I'm there sometimes, but it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
So the next thing I'll just ask you real quick is what your history is with art schools and your educational background.
I did a graphic design degree after finished high school,
Okay.
which in Melbourne, Australia. So it wasn't really aimed towards the video games industry as such, but I sort of knew that that was what I wanted to do anyway. So it wasn't too stressful a degree, and it allowed me. I mean, it helped in some ways, and there was a lot of free time for me to just develop on my own as well.
So
So
you pretty much worked a lot on your own as well, just kind of drawing a lot.
yeah, definitely.
And did you always want to be an artist, like even in high school?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh,
I know
okay.
it was. It took me a while to work out which direction I wanted to go in specifically, but I knew it was gonna have to be something creative.
Yeah. What made you decide on concept art?
Um, I think it was just wanting to be a part of the video games industry probably, and then not being a lot more into the 2D side of things rather than the
Yeah.
3D side. That seemed like the most exciting part of it, the bit where you get to come up with all the cool ideas, really.
Yeah. It also seems like one of the most kind of challenging and maybe rewarding things to
Oh
do with
yeah,
2D
yeah,
art,
definitely.
just like
It's
digital painting these days.
yeah, it's definitely not an easy job. But it's, well, I mean, I guess there's a scale, but it can be difficult.
Yeah. Have you worked anywhere other than Blizzard?
Not as an employee. I did some freelance illustration work, some of which I got through my father, who's also a graphic designer illustrator,
Oh, that's
for
nice.
sort of educational publishing stuff. And then just before I got hired out here, I was doing a fair amount of freelance stuff for Privateer Press, who are a miniatures wargaming company up in Seattle, which was a lot of fun.
That sounds fun. Yeah. So I think that's about it, and I guess we could jump into the video and maybe see a little bit about your work method and all that stuff. So it should
Cool.
be fun.
So to start off with, I had a fairly good idea of what I wanted to draw. Sort of mech suit lady with big rocket launcher thing. So the way I usually start off with is just colored background, usually fairly dark, not super saturated, but a nice non-white background to start off with. I had a bit of a pose in my head, so sketching just starts off pretty roughly.
So do you normally start all your paintings by knowing what you want to do, or is that uncommon?
Not always. Something like this probably will. If I do this style where I'm doing this sort of tighter line work, often will start off with something more concrete in my mind, just because if I'm doing tight line work, then I need to have a good idea of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
If I'm starting with less of an idea in my head, usually it ends up sort of more painterly. I'll just start laying colors down and seeing where that takes me. But something like this, um, it's yeah. I don't really have any super hard and fast rules about how much line work I do to start a painting or how much underdrawing I do.
Yeah, I'm
Really,
actually surprised at how much line work is going into this piece. And maybe that's because
actually,
I've seen like the final piece, but it definitely has a more painterly feel than,
yeah.
than this would.
Actually, I think I was initially, because you'd asked me to do a video, I was like, all right, I want to see what people want to see, and then I started drawing this, and I realized, people, a lot of the time well, I mean, a lot of the last few things I've been doing, the process gifs I put up on DeviantArt, they're all very sort of painterly. I just don't do any line. There's like a very small sketch and everything that sort of looks like I'm cheating now. I'm actually drawing it. But it really depends on, I think it really depends on how much of an idea I've got in my head to start and how much I think I want to have to plan it out. So with technical stuff, I usually do more of a line drawing just because it's easier to figure out perspective and symmetrical things.
So did you do any like thumbnailing type stuff before you started this?
No, not for this.
Okay.
I accidentally, well, not accidentally, incidentally, I'd done an incredibly brief sketch at work earlier in the day that was like, because this idea had sort of popped into my head, but
Oh.
I didn't have it with me, so no.
So you heard it here first that this is a confirmed design for StarCraft 5.
Yep, something we're putting away for for the future. Yeah, so it also depends actually as much uh, as far as the line work is concerned as how much time I'm planning on spending on something.
Yeah.
If I'm only going to maybe spend an hour or two on it, then I'll make more closer to an hour. If I'm aiming at that, I'll usually do less line work just because I want to get into painting earlier. But if I'm like, oh, I could spend a couple of hours on this, then I'll plan it out a little bit more just because I've got the time to spend on that stage of it.
So here's something that interesting that I'm seeing, and that's just because you're using so much of like your background layer that those kind of base values you established, you're using them a
Yeah.
lot in the actual painting itself. Like you're not completely, like masking them out or anything
Yeah,
like
no,
that.
it's one of the reasons I start off with a dark background is that I get to I can just sort of paint the highlights into it, and then I don't have there's a lot of base there. So I will start off when it comes to the first coloring or the first rendering phase. I'll do usually put in a lot of the shadows first, just with dark gradients, and then start painting the highlights back into that, and that way it leaves a lot of the shadows end up looking like they've already been painted in, where really they were just there already, and I painted around them.
Yeah.
Um, and it's sort of it feels like a nice way of avoiding ending up with too much black in the shadows, and then I can go back later and paint the extra darks in. But I like that sort of feeling. Some people do it really well. Someone like Jim Murray does it really well, where shadows, while they look dark, there's actually a lot of color in them, and so leave it like with the orange, subtle orange gradients that I'm doing there as well. There's sort of like a little bit of different colored light in the shadows rather than just a black shadow.
Oh, you mentioned another artist, and that actually brings up something I've wanted to ask you. I know you're a fan of Ashley Wood like I am, but what are some of your other main influences artistically? Favorite artists?
Other favorite artists. These days, it's really difficult to choose. I mean, there are so many of them.
Yeah.
Um, someone. I mean, initially, it was always someone like a lot of comic artists, like Joe Mad and that sort of stuff was always really cool. But obviously, that's not so related to this sort of thing anymore. These days, like painterly stuff like Brom, and I look back at people like Frazetta and that sort of older school fantasy art stuff is really cool. Um, as far as like sci-fi stuff goes, there's varying things. Just a whole bunch of people on DeviantArt really doing crazy stuff. It's always cool. I don't know other people who do professional. A lot of people at work actually. A whole heap of people,
Oh, yeah,
especially the
definitely.
creative dev department like Glenn Rain and Wei Wang are insane. And a bunch of guys who are working currently on the secret projects. Their stuff is just amazing.
Secret projects.
Yeah, and even just like that, all their personal work is really incredible as well.
Oh, I guess there's something I should bring up, and that's probably a pretty noticeable thing, and that is that you're working in Photoshop, because all my videos are obviously in Painter, but
Yes,
is that your program of
yeah,
choice?
it is. I've been working with it for a very long time now, and I sort of wanted to get into Painter for a while, but I tried it a little bit, and I think the version I had was sort of slow and clunky on my computer, and I never got around to getting it worked out properly.
Yeah,
Um,
but you seem to be using pretty much almost exclusively this like square shape brush.
yeah, I've done that, especially for my Painterly stuff. It's it gives a nice sort of semi-painterly feel to the work without being, I don't know, it feels a little weird when I'm using like sort of faux paint
Yeah.
brushes and stuff. So this
So does that brush
it's a
have
little
any
bit less
special
obvious.
properties or
Oh
anything?
no, nothing, not really. It's a square shape that follows a path,
Okay.
or that follows the direction of the brush that I'm in. It's got pressure and or size and opacity set to the pen pressure. Um, And yeah, it feels a little less obviously Photoshoppy than the default round brush, which I do quite like sometimes as well. Um, but it's just that extra squareness gives it quite a little bit of extra harshness and not quite just that same blobby look that you sometimes get. It's nicer for mechanical stuff,
There we
definitely.
have some editing
Yeah,
selecting.
uh, it's just a copy merge. I've been trying to work just on one layer, or like one layer for the painting over the top here. So it's just a select and a copy merge transform. That thing that had been bugging me the whole time. The shape of the circle. I was partly staying on one layer just because I didn't want the file to get too big because I was screen recording it as well and didn't want to crash or something.
Yeah.
Um, but also it just feels nicer working on one layer. I mean, sometimes I'll go through and add another layer over the top as I go, like when I'm starting to do different details and stuff. But if I start getting too much, it just ends up getting annoying because you always, I think a lot of people when they're using layers, you sort of have this idea that's like, oh, everything's editable, I can go back and change it. But I often find that when I'm doing that, I won't ever go back and edit the layers underneath. I'll just make a new layer over the top of everything. It just gets compounded and it's really not that useful sometimes. The only really useful thing about it, I guess, is depending on the sort of thing you're doing, it can be good for like masking and selecting stuff if you've actually done like flatting and you've blocked in your colors on layers underneath if you've saved selections or something. But other than that, for this sort of painting, it's nice just to work on a single layer.
Yeah,
So something
I
like
agree.
these I'm working on a separate layer just so I can move them around a little bit, and then I'll flatten it down again once they're moved around. And so when I do a copy merged, I'll paste that onto a new layer and then eventually flatten it into the regular painting.
Yeah, I'm definitely a big fan of trying to work on as few layers as possible. I think it's just like a good habit. It kind of gets you in that mindset of more painterly, like always like painting over stuff instead of, just
Yeah,
editing and messing with
yeah,
stuff like that.
exactly. Actually, I think I've sort of gotten better at not necessarily undoing so much and more, um, yeah, more just painting over stuff, which is really a lot easier when you're just doing it on one layer. I mean, obviously, I'll undo things all the time, but it feels like it's more traditional if you paint in and then paint out again. You don't have to go back and get every stroke right every time.
Yeah. So if I was gonna make an observation about like what I'm seeing, I would say there's a lot of like really loose kind of like blocks of, color and lighting going in, but then there's a really strong emphasis on like edge control in like the edges of everything.
Yeah, that's when I'm working, especially when I'm working on mechanical stuff. I feel that the areas you don't really want to do too much rendering across any specific area unless it's like rounded, I guess. But
Yeah.
I think being rough with your paint, like with the brush strokes, is fine as long as your main shapes are well defined. So like if the shadows are a bit smudgy or if like the rendering across a plate of armor isn't super smooth the whole way across, as long as your edges are sharp and they meet at the right angles in perspective wise, then you can get away with a lot. And I think that's really an important part of how you can get the sort of loose but or painterly but tight sort of look.
Yeah, that face is actually kind of a good example of what I was talking about. You kind of did a really kind of loose like white and then like a spot of red like where the nose would be, and then you just kind of define the edges real fast.
Yeah, definitely. And that way you don't have to paint it blend it all in together, but you sort of start with the colors underneath and just add a little bit in. Actually, that face came together quite well. I was paranoid. Sometimes my faces I mean, I'm always usually fairly happy with the way they turn out in the end, but sometimes it can take like
Yeah.
5, 10 iterations before it comes out with something I like. So I obviously wasn't thinking too much about that one. It worked okay the first time, and I was glad. It would
Yeah.
have been very embarrassing.
Yeah, that's
Just
always
maybe
nice.
I just would have gotten you to cut it out of the video. I don't know. It's alright.
Yes. We won't tell them about the like 3 hours that we cut out while you were trying to fix the face.
Yeah, gotta keep that hush hush.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
So it's kind of an interesting design that you've gone with this kind of open, I would say it's kind of a retro feeling, uh,
yeah, definitely.
definitely like the head part, but the rest of it is very futuristic feeling, which kind of creates a nice little look to it.
Yeah, I was going for a very sort of very, I guess, realistic-ish for parts of it, military look for the like the missile launcher and stuff, but then mixing it with a little bit of slightly retro, slightly sort of even uh, sort of anime style, flowy shapes and stuff. Um, and then yeah, like the glass dome helmet, I think is just like the total retro thing. I really
Yeah,
like it. And
definitely.
obviously, you get away with it. It feels like it's halfway between the impractical, no armor on your head, but you get away with being able to see the face. So I think it's sort of an okay compromise there.
So it seems like you're listening to a lot of static at this point.
Yes,
I'm
yes,
just
a
commenting
very
on that because
track
I'm
static.
sure someone that's watching these videos will be paying quick attention to everything you're listening to in hopes that it will make them paint like you do.
Yes. I always have music playing while I'm painting, unless I'm watching StarCraft games, I guess.
Yeah.
I
I-
borrow a laptop and
Oh, so you watch a lot of StarCraft and stuff too?
yeah,
Do
definitely
you play
keep up with.
StarCraft?
Yeah,
Okay.
I've still
You want to tell
battering.
us your actions per minute, or is that?
I don't know my actions per minute. I'm in diamonds, so I'm not too bad, but I always feel like it's such a painful game.
Yeah.
It's so addictive. But yeah, I totally keep up with the pro scene.
Yeah.
Actually, should be going to Vegas for IPL in a
Nice.
couple of weeks. Some StarCraft tournament goodness. But anyway, back to the painting.
Yes.
Something else is going on here. So I
A lot of accent colors, it looks
actually
like.
finally actually doing that on a new layer. Um, because I find it easy when I'm doing that sort of thing to easy just to erase like paint the accent in and then erase back over it and just cut it out. So there are times when being on a new layer is very convenient.
Yeah.
And also, actually, when I'm doing the accent colors, I'll often paint a swatch down, turn on lock the transparency of the layer, and then either add in the shadows or change the color of it a little bit, which is really helpful for that sort of stuff. To keep edges sharp, but change the colors,
Yeah.
so you don't have to do too many tricks. And then this final stage, normally, well, a lot of the time for like, especially with my concept work, I guess, and sort of just the general, just like character stuff without a background, I'll often add in a white background, but I thought that'd be a bit unexciting for this one, so I decided to do a little bit of a background, sort of space orbiting the Earth or something.
Yeah, this
Uh,
definitely seems like the final step that really sums up like that idea of just keeping things loose and then really defining the edges.
yeah. So yeah, just make sure the edges are sharp, and then the background doesn't have to be like solid black. It's nice if there's some variation in it, and but yeah, it's just definitely making sure the silhouette is all neat and clean and it's got all the shapes. I'll often cut back into certain areas or redefine little bits that I didn't really pay attention to. You notice that I guess during the earlier parts of it, I wasn't necessarily worrying about the outside edges. It was just interior
Yeah,
edges. I do all that at the very end
it's
and
definitely
just
it seems like a productive workflow.
yeah, yeah. I think I do things differently sometimes, but there are a few things that I will sort of stick to most of the time. So yeah, that final cutout process, even when I'm doing more of just a painting with a background, I'll often save the background till last and make sure I define edges later because I find it easier to work that way and you really pop stuff out.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So I think that's about it for the video, but we can still talk a little bit about the piece just overall.
Sure.
Is there anything you're unhappy with about it, or
Um, the foreshortening on the legs is a little bit awkward, and my symmetrical design gets really it can be frustrating. I don't with stuff like this, even though I did a tight line work drawing, well, tight-ish. I didn't necessarily think too much about the way it sort of fit together, and so as I was painting, I was like making it up as I go along. And so sometimes the symmetry doesn't work quite as well as I might have hoped, but I was fairly happy with it overall.
I have a slight compositional issue with the brightness in the bottom corner and the way the leg kind of leads into it.
Oh, it's fair enough.
But I, it looked good for a while. I don't know if you changed something about it near the end, but yeah.
Maybe they'd make it a little bit too bright.
Or maybe it looks like, well, what is that thing supposed to be just before I
It's
say?
supposed to be a planet.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. I think it's because it looks like there's a little bit of like reflection going on.
Ah, okay, yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah. I
Maybe it
think
looks
maybe
like
that's
she's
it.
standing on it. There's like a
Yeah.
shadow on
It
her
looks
foot.
like she's standing on the planet
Maybe I need
and
to.
she's just
Maybe I'll tweak
shiny.
that before I put it up on DeviantArt. Nice.
But yeah, it's a nice looking piece overall. Is How long did this take you to make?
It was 2 hours and 45 minutes.
Is that pretty standard for your
Yeah,
speed?
that's about average. I
That's
think for just a painting that I do for myself, I usually want to get stuff done in one sitting,
yeah,
just in an evening or an afternoon on the weekend.
yeah. I've never understood the people who can like work on like the same piece for weeks at a time.
Yeah,
It
it's difficult.
seems draining.
Especially if because I mean, as soon as I am done with something, like after an afternoon, I'll go back and look at it and be like, oh, there's all these things I would want to do differently. I was gonna spend like 3 weeks on something. I just at the end of it, I'd hate it probably. Oh, I don't know.
So let's see. Do you have anything to say about like your color choices? You obviously went with the green and then you picked an orange just to complement.
I do. I think it's sort of something I fall back on quite a bit. The orange highlights. It's just cool. I think this color scheme. I don't remember where it was, but I think I stole it from somewhere. I saw a piece of art, maybe on DeviantArt somewhere. I was like, oh, that's awesome. I should use that. So I think I sort of dredged it up from my memory when I was doing this. I pretty much knew that that's what I was wanting to aim for when I started the piece, though, which is why I was using the earlier on, just as I started rendering the sort of orange,
Oh yeah,
just general subtle gradients
yeah. That
in the
subtle kind of
shadows.
highlight or
Yeah.
color change, hue shift, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
So before anyone asks, like there was this little brief like second of you looking on the internet, and I'm just gonna bring it up because I'm sure someone will pause on it, but it looked like you were actually looking at the tutorial thread in conceptart.org, making of Dreadnought. I'm
Yes,
just gonna tell
that
people what
was
it
it.
is because they might have
This
paused on
is
it, but it is actually a
awesome.
really great thread. So
It's an incredible
I
thread
thought
with
it was
some
so like
amazing
hilarious when I
sci-fi
saw this video that you like paused on it because I was looking at it too, like at the time. So I'm like, oh,
I think I was actually. I don't think I actually skipped over to that. I was going to. I swap to iTunes or something, but
uh,
it showed up in the background. But yeah, totally had that up because it's a freaking amazing thread and everyone should
I
look
was
at it.
actually gonna see like if I could message that guy and get him to talk about SketchUp, but I realized he's Russian and doesn't really speak English, so kind of
Yeah,
sad about
pretty.
that. I'll find someone to talk about SketchUp because it's a
I should start trying to use it. I
yeah.
need
I
to
was
do
gonna
more
ask you that.
stuff.
Have you tried doing any 3D or SketchUp stuff?
A little bit. I've done some 3D, yeah. Actually, a couple of the critters in the original in StarCraft, in Wings of Liberty are mine. I made the Automaton 2000, I think that's his name, and the Ursidax are all mine, 3D files. But no, I don't do very much of it, and certainly not in my personal work. I just sort of have so many things that I feel like I want to work on in my painting that it feels like I don't have enough time to.
Yeah. I guess that might be my final question for you. It's like, what do you think the future holds? Where do you want to take your art stuff? Or do you have any great farther ambitions or plans?
Honestly, it's I don't really know at the moment. I'm working at Blizzard, and that seems like a pretty
That's a pretty good response.
stable.
I'm asking you what your ambitions are, and you're just like, well, I'm working at Blizzard, so
So I'm gonna keep doing
mission
that.
accomplished.
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing the WoW cards in my spare time.
Yeah.
That keeps things mixed up a little bit, but yeah, no, I'm really enjoying myself at the moment, and I'll carry on doing that for now, and doing my own personal stuff. yeah, I always want to keep pushing myself there as well.
All right. Well, I'm gonna thank you once again for joining me and doing this little commentative video and sharing your process with everyone. And
Thanks for having me. It's
hopefully people get a lot out of it. I know I did personally. I really enjoyed it. So thanks
cool.
for that.
I've been meaning to do this for a while, so thanks for prompting me to get off my ass.
So thanks for that. And I guess that's all. So I'll say goodbye for now.
Goodbye, everybody.